Hello and welcome to Saturday Agenda. Thank God I'm not Chris Kenny. No, I'm filling in for him. Peter Van Onselen, thanks very much for your company. And I'm speaking to Matt Thistlethwaite, recently promoted Matt Thistlethwaite. Congratulations.
Thanks, Peter.
And joining us out of Melbourne, Josh Frydenberg, representing the Liberal Party. Josh, thanks for your company as well.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Josh.
Let's start with you, Senator. You've been promoted. Is it really worth bothering? 170 days, you're going to be out of office almost certainly. You know, you might as well not have yourself affiliated with this front bench and put yourself in a position to be able to be part of the rebuild.
Look, it's a great honour to be appointed to the executive level of government in this country, and Richard Marles has done an excellent job in one of the portfolio areas that I have. And I think the fact that this government has someone in Pacific Island affairs at the executive level underscores the importance we see of relations with the region.
Well, Mark Latham was planning to appoint a PALSEC for Pacific Island Affairs. He was going to put Kevin Rudd in that portfolio, he said in his diaries. Do you feel like you've got big shoes to fill in that sense?
I do, because Rich has done a very good job of engaging with the Pacific, and I think he's really elevated that portfolio to a level that it's never had in Australian domestic politics before. And it's really important because through our role in the Pacific Islands Forum, there's a whole wealth of opportunity for Australia in development, particularly throughout the Asia Pacific, and I'm looking forward to engaging with players within the region and ensuring that the Australian economy maximises the benefits from engagement. It's
too early in the program to get into the policy details. We'll do that later. Let's stick to the politics. Now, there's an irony, isn't there, that on the one hand you've got a member of the Victorian right, Richard Marles, who had to step down from the portfolio when he broke ranks with the wider Victorian right who were backing the Prime Minister, yet a member of the New South Wales right, your good self, who effectively broke ranks with where the New South Wales right were by supporting Kevin Rudd. You stuck with the Prime Minister, you get a promotion. There's, you know, it's interesting the way politics works.
Yeah, but I think if you look at the Labor caucus, there's a wealth of talent and there's people always willing to serve and step up to the plate. So I've got the great fortune of taking on this portfolio area now. I jumped at it when the Prime Minister offered me the opportunity, and now I'm looking forward to building on Richard's good work and working within the region, working particularly with multicultural communities around Western Sydney, around Brisbane and Melbourne in particular, and engaging with them about Labor's plan for the future.
Josh Frydenberg, you must be, green with envy, given your love of foreign affairs, yet your complete inability to get on the Liberal Party front bench because Tony Abbott would rather keep various dinosaurs in those portfolios rather than rejuvenate.
I think that's a very unfair characterisation, Peter, and you know that's just stirring from on your part. I mean, at the end of the day, we've got a great team, and they're all behind Tony Abbott, both the front bench and the back bench, and we're looking forward to fight the next election on the real policy issues. But I wish Matt all the best in his new role. I must say the record hasn't been good. Richard Marles is a good bloke, but at the end of the day, we're persona non grata with Fiji, one of the key partners in the Pacific.
What do you think we should do, Josh, to fix that? I mean, at the end of the day, they're not a democracy. They violate democratic principles. We stand up against that. That makes them not like us. How do we resolve that?
Well, we should be working with our Commonwealth partners to engage more directly with Frank Bainimarama and the Fijian government, because at the end of the day we can't have them going rogue in our region. We can't have them holding different forums in competing with the Pacific Islands Forum, for example, that Australia plays a lead role. We can't have them going cap in hand to China, trying to develop a relationship to keep the United States and us out of Fiji and elsewhere in the region. I mean, these are serious issues that Matt needs to throw himself into. Well, I mean, let's also hope Matt can also bring a saner hand to foreign affairs and give Bob Carr a hand up, because Bob Carr has been hopeless as foreign minister, and we've seen key relationships with India, with China, with other partners like Japan, all languish under Bob Carr's leadership. So I'm hoping Matt, rises to the challenge.
All right, beautifully on message there, Josh. Everything is ruined under this government, including our relationship with Fiji. But let me just give the new PALSEC the chance to respond.
Well, I don't accept that characterisation of our relationship with Fiji at all. We've said all along with Fiji that we want them to return to democracy and will assist all we can do to ensure that they do return to democracy. And we've got a good record there. We've provided $3.2 million to ensure that they've got a process of developing a constitution, enrolling voters. 500,000 people have been enrolled to vote in in Fiji as a result of our commitment there. We've engaged with Fiji. Over the past year, the Foreign Minister Bob Carr has met with the Fijian Foreign Minister Kumbumbula on 3 occasions. So we're engaging with them. And as to China, we welcome China's involvement within the region. But what we've said is that there is a process that's been established through the Pacific Islands Forum called the Cairns Compact, where the aid budget is distributed according to need within the region, and it's all transparent and accountable. And that is the process that Australia has used and developed and worked within the region to ensure. So I don't accept that characterisation at all.
Well, Matt, one question for you is, did Fiji vote for us to get on the UN Security Council?
Well,
yes
look,
or no?
Well, look...
Yes or no?
Well,
yes
look,
or no?
to be honest, I'm going to move...
Yes or no?
No, Josh, I'm going to move us on, because as interesting and dynamically important as Fiji is, I've already been there on a holiday. I won't go back for a while. We should move on to weightier issues, one of which is on the front page of the Australian newspaper, the idea that the Prime Minister is going to be travelling to China. She's going to be pushing for a currency deal which will be worth a lot of money for Australian businesses. Josh Frydenberg, do you at least applaud that?
I do support the currency deal if we can get that through, and I noticed Jeff Raby, a distinguished former Australian ambassador to China, has also come out strongly in favour of it. But at the end of the day, the Prime Minister's been asleep at the wheel when it comes to our bilateral relationship with China. There's been one Australian Prime Ministerial visit to Beijing since the Olympics there in 2008. You know, contrast that, Peter, with Chancellor Merkel in Germany, who basically goes there every year with a serious delegation of business leaders and cabinet ministers. China is our #1 trading partner. We have more than $120 billion of annual trade every year. We're a bigger supplier of coal. We're the biggest supplier of iron ore. We supply wool.
But we've got professional...
But
Josh Frydenberg, we've got professional diplomats there. The Foreign Minister has been regularly. The West Australian Premier, indeed, has been regularly. Why does a Prime Minister who's got a wider ambit of responsibility than just China need to be weighing in as well when there are so many capable people doing it on her behalf?
Because at the end of the day, the Prime Minister needs to lead on foreign policy. There is no substitute for a meeting between the Prime Minister and Xi Jinping, the new leader, with Hu Jintao, the predecessor. I mean, at the end of the day, there are serious security issues, for example, in the South China Sea that could come unravelled involving Japan and other countries, key partners of ours, the Philippines and Vietnam.
Will Tony Abbott be any different? Because Tony Abbott has made it quite clear that in his view, what he would want to do as Prime Minister is re-engage more substantially with the Western sphere as opposed to in our own zone, if you like, across Southeast Asia. He thinks that greater ties to our traditional allies and partners in the West is something that he would look to focus on. That's actually completely the opposite of what you're suggesting should happen by the sounds of it.
Actually, that is not true, Peter. What Tony Abbott has made clear is that his first visit overseas will be to Indonesia, to sit down with President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono and work out how to stop the boats. That's his first visit.
That's his first visit, but he has said his priority would be engagement with the Western sphere and reinvigorating ties with Britain and the United States. That is completely the opposite of what you're saying in relation to the focus and the need for focus on China.
That's actually not right, Peter. I mean, at the end of the day, he will keep a strong alliance relationship with the United States, and we've got strong historical and current ties with Great Britain. And that's not mutually exclusive from deeper engagement with Japan, deeper engagement with India, and, of course, deeper engagement with China. But my point about the Prime Minister is that she hasn't actually taken the baton with China, our key trading partner, a key partner on security issues in our region. I mean, if you look at North Korea today, I mean, who's got the most influence with North Korea? It's China. I mean, the Prime Minister should be taking this issue directly up with Beijing and doing what we can to make a safer region for all of us.
I'm having an argument with Josh Frydenberg about this, Senator, but he does make a fair point, doesn't he, that if we haven't had a Prime Ministerial visit since the Beijing Olympics, that's pretty dodgy, quite frankly, given the ever-rising importance of China. And it's the Labor Party more than anyone that talks about the significance of the relationship with China, yet it's not following up on those words through Prime Ministerial visits.
No, that's complete rubbish. I mean, we've got a strong relationship with China. It's our most important trading partner. And
despite the lack of engagement by the Prime Minister bothering to go there.
Well, no, the Prime Minister has visited there, and
how many times, Matt?
Hang on, members of the executive are regularly there. Bob Carr is regularly engaging with China. Craig Emerson has made more trips to China, I think, than any other minister in the history of government in Australia.
But the fact that Bob Carr and Craig Emerson, enjoy the French precinct of Shanghai doesn't substitute for the fact that having a Prime Minister make regular visits, exactly as Josh Frydenberg says, is diplomatically of great value.
And the Prime Minister's going. Prime Minister's going. But look, the other point to make is that this government has a policy of the Asian Century white paper. So there's no greater commitment to where we see ourselves positioning our economy into the future, people-to-people engagement, particularly around education. We've said that we want to shift the focus in education away from traditional European languages towards Asian languages. We see ourselves very much as engaged within Asia and doing all we can to engage within Asia. And anything that we can do more to integrate our two economies is welcomed.
Josh, do you concede that the appointment of Craig Emerson, who I'll be speaking to on Australian Agenda tomorrow morning, is a good one in terms of the mix of super portfolios that he has? On the one hand, he has responsibility for trade. On the other hand, he has responsibility for higher education, which is increasingly drawing on overseas students from China. And on top of that, he's in a position where he played an integral role in the drafting of this Asian Century white paper. It's a pretty good mix that the Prime Minister's given one of her key lieutenants.
No, it's not. And the fact is that Craig Emerson getting this super portfolio is a vote of no confidence in the other members of the Labor caucus. I mean, she couldn't share the bounty around. And the fact is, when Craig Emerson has been engaging with China, he hasn't delivered an FTA. I mean, that's his number one job as the Trade Minister, deliver an FTA with our biggest trading partner. I mean, Julie Bishop's been to China, I think, 4 times in the last 16, 18 months. She's been to this Bao Forum, which the Prime Minister's eventually going to, on numerous occasions. I mean, they've completely dropped the ball.
How many times has Tony Abbott visited?
Well, he was only there a few months ago.
But how many times has he visited?
Well, he's been there. He was there as a health minister. I know that for sure, and he was only there.
You mean
a few months ago.
Ahead of the 2007 election?
Yeah, but he was there a few months ago. And that was his most recent visit. When was the Prime Minister's most recent visit? You'd have to go back to 2010, to see a visit from the Prime Minister. At the end of the day, these super ministries that you asked me about, Peter, reminds me of what Gough Whitlam did coming to power in 1972 with Lance Barnard. He took 14 portfolios. Lance Barnard took 13, and between them they had all 27 ministerial portfolios.
Josh, leave the government alone. I mean, they've got enough problems. You don't need to bring up the 1975 government of Gough Whitlam. We're going to take a commercial break. When we come back, a lot more issues to discuss, including in the domestic context. You're watching Saturday Agenda. Welcome back. You're watching Saturday Agenda, where I'm joined out of Melbourne by the Liberal Party's Josh Frydenberg, and here with me in the studio, Senator Matt Thistlethwaite. Josh, during the commercial break, you were lobbying hard for us to talk about the West Australian election. That is ancient history. No need to go back there. The news cycle moves quickly. Let me ask you about some other ancient history, though. You were pretty outspoken in your view about the need for industrial relations reforms within the Liberal Party if they get into government, and you were shut down hard by some of your more senior colleagues. Are you going to be as outspoken as that inside the caucus once in government? Because Tony Abbott doesn't look like he really wants to go near the topic.
Well, look, industrial relations reform is an important topic because we've seen a historic re-regulation of the labour market here under the Gillard government. I mean, it's a function of the Prime Minister's weakness that she has had to go cap in hand to the unions and give them much more authority. So right of entry, power over greenfield sites and so forth. But, we've announced already that we're going to reintroduce the Australian Building Construction Commission, which is a cop on the beat, which has helped to reduce lawlessness in that sector.
But why aren't you prepared to go harder, though? Like, quite serious question. Why aren't you prepared to go harder? I know that there is concern within coalition ranks about the spectre of a scare campaign by Labor in relation to work choices, but the reality is you're so far ahead in the polls. This government, despite what the Senator here might tell us, is so dead in the water. If you're not prepared to go for it now in outlining IR reform of the next election, when are you going to be prepared to? And I mean serious reform, not just tinkering around the edges.
Well, I think, we will be announcing our policy on industrial relations reform, and I'm not going to preempt what it actually says, because that's up to Eric Abetz and to the leader, Tony Abbott. But, you've heard from business, there are serious problems in the workplace at the moment, and it's responsible for increasing militancy and lower productivity. And, from senior business leaders, you're hearing it all the time. The fact they've just made a whole series of new appointments over the last few days to the Fair Work Commission, and they haven't appointed anybody, Peter, with industrial experience, that is a real problem.
For your part, though, you're unrepentant about your strong stand on needing more IR reform, even if your colleagues slapped it down at the time?
Well, I don't believe they did slap it down, and I am not unrepentant about anything that I've said in the past on IR reform, and I know that all my colleagues, including the leader Tony Abbott and Eric Abetz, we're all on the same page on this.
All right, I know you want to talk about IR reform, Senator, but I'm not going to let you. We're not going to have a free kick on IR reform.
I want to congratulate Josh. Because at least he's speaking his mind on this. And his leader isn't. And the rhetoric doesn't meet the reality in the Liberal Party. We all know as soon as they come to government, if they do, they will cut conditions. That's what Liberal governments do when it comes to industrial relations.
I am sure that Josh welcomes your praise of him for speaking his mind on this issue.
Keep speaking your mind, Josh.
I want to talk to you about another issue, and let's hope that you speak your mind on this. Super reform. Now, I saw you on The Nation talking about this with David Spears and making the very valid point that we don't actually know what is or isn't ruled in or out because those details are to come in the budget. But here's my point. Wouldn't it be politically, professionally smart, and you're a former State Secretary for the Labor Party in New South Wales, you understand the organisational importance of strategy, wouldn't it be smart for the Labor Party to tell us now and end the doubt and the concern over what is happening on super? And the reason I say that is because they may end up doing minimal changes that don't affect ordinary people. But the emails that I see here at Sky News and the feedback I get at The Australian, people, particularly self-funded retirees, are scared out of their pants about what's going to happen, possibly for no good reason. But that's got to hurt the government until they find a real answer to what's going on.
Yeah, well, I can't speculate on what's going to be in and out of the budget. But it's incumbent upon all good governments to assess the efficiency of the taxation system, particularly around budget time, and that's what's going on at the moment.
But you accept that politically it's tough for the government with the uncertainty, because you must be hearing from self-funded retirees the same way that I'm hearing as a journalist from them. They just don't know what's happening. I suspect that they're not going to have anything happen against them for the majority of them. But from the government's perspective, they don't know yet because we haven't heard.
But it's the nature of a Westminster system and a budget that's introduced into the Parliament. You can't disclose the details of that until it's introduced by the Treasurer on budget night. But the people of Australia can take great comfort in the fact that Labor built our superannuation system in this country. It's a fair and effective one, and it's probably one of the best retirement income systems in the world. The fourth largest pool of retirement funds, $1.4 trillion. It really did assist our economy in the wake of the global financial crisis, and we've made the system fairer. What we do know from the opposition at the moment is that they're going to cut the low-income superannuation contribution, which will mean a tax increase of 15% for 3.6 million low-paid workers, most of whom are women, 2.1 million of them. That's what we know the opposition are going to do. They're going to increase taxes on superannuation for low-income workers.
Well, Josh Frydenberg, that is true. You laugh, but we do know that because that is part of the compensation package that you're planning to repeal if you repeal the carbon tax. So low-income earners are going to take a super hit, albeit at the same time that you remove the carbon tax.
Actually, that was funded by the mining tax, and we know how much revenue.
I can't remember which tax has funded it, but anyway, the point is the same.
The point is that it was funded by mining taxes, raised no revenue. And when you talk about cutting, low-income earners, Matt, don't you remember that you've cut the co-contributions for low-income earners from $1,500 down to under John Howard to $500 now?
The co-contribution is still around. The co-contribution is still around.
I gave you a fair go. I gave you a fair go. I've given you a fair go.
Matt, we'll go one at a time, Josh, and then I'll give the Senator a chance to respond.
Matt, I gave you a fair go to talk about your cut to aspirational Australians, your latest instalment in class warfare, and that's what this attack on super is all about. They're desperate to fill a massive budget black hole, you know, up to $20 billion that we're going to face in May, the 5th biggest budget deficit in the history of the Commonwealth, the other 4 coming on Julia Gillard and Kevin Rudd's watch. And, you know, they're desperate, so they're going to attack superannuation. And that is just very bad for the economy. And now that the Labor Party's backbench has become a graveyard for the front bench, no wonder then people like Simon Crean and Joel Fitzgibbon and Kim Carr and others are saying, don't touch superannuation.
Let me
it's
give
coming
Matt
from your own
Thistlewaite a
people,
chance
Matt.
to respond. I mean, that's a fair point. It is inside the Labor Party that the concerns are mostly emanating from in relation to what may or may not happen with super.
Yeah, but it's, as I said, it's pure speculation. Now, the comment that about the co-contribution, well, we've widened that concession at the lower end on superannuation by ensuring that more workers have access to a fair and reasonable concession on their superannuation. And it's really about an incentive to ensure that people stay in the workforce rather than going on to welfare. That's what the low-income super contribution is all about.
OK, we've only got a couple of minutes on program, gentlemen, but I want to ask you about comparisons of governments of today to governments of years gone by. I wrote about this today in The Australian. Yeah. Matt Thistlewaite, my point about the Prime Minister is I don't want to get into debates about how the reforms of Hawke compare to the reforms of Julia Gillard, because that's a subjective debate.
Yeah.
What I think is a legitimate point, I want to know if you agree with this, is that if Gillard or the Gillard government wants to be compared in its significance in reform to the Hawke years and the Hawke government, it needs to win the next election to bed down its reforms, because there's no point in comparing what it may have achieved if a lot of that gets undone by Tony Abbott in government. Hawke's great success was that he won elections and bedded down his reforms. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think you know, the test of any government is whether or not their policies stand the test of time. And the reforms of the Hawke-Keating government, particularly in economics, certainly have. And our economy has been all the more better for it, particularly in terms of the productivity of our nation. Our trading relationship, particularly with Asia, was built on the back of the reforms of the 1980s. But
so for the carbon tax to matter as a long-term reform, it needs to not be repealed, which means Gillard must win the next election.
I met with Tim Yeo, who's the chairman of the Climate Change Committee in the British Parliament. And he expressed the view that if the carbon price was removed in Australia, it would be seen as a profound disappointment by the rest of the world. And he made the key point that Australia is the lead economy in Asia,
sure,
and it will send a devastating message to Asia if the carbon price is removed. But that's not going to change
Tony Abbott's view on this. He's going to repeal it if he wins. So for the Prime Minister's legacy on carbon pricing to matter in a Hawke sense, she must win the next election to bed it down.
For us to ensure that we protect the environment for future generations, the carbon price needs to stay.
All right, we're almost out of time, Josh Frydenberg, very much almost out of time. So just very quickly, your response?
Well, at the end of the day, they're not going to compare the Gillard government to the Hawke government. They're going to compare it to the Whitlam government. But as Tony Abbott has said, that's unfair to Gough Whitlam, because this is much worse. Gough Whitlam produced 3 budget surpluses. This government's produced the 4 biggest deficits in the history of the Australian Parliament, and it's only going to get worse in May.
There you go. You managed to bring Gough Whitlam back into it again in a comparison none too favourably from that position for this government. But we are out of time. Matt Thistlewaite misses out on his chance to respond. I'm going to have to start getting you on some of my programs rather than let Chris Kenny monopolise your time. We'll get your details on the way out. Josh Frydenberg out of Melbourne, much appreciate your company on this Easter weekend. Australia's first future Jewish Prime Minister making himself available on the Easter weekend. Really appreciate that. Thank you. And Senator Matt Thistlewaite, congratulations on your portfolio promotion.
Pleasure.
You've been watching Saturday Agenda. Chris Kenny will be back in the chair next Saturday, and of course he'll be here for his program on Sunday Night Viewpoint, where he has opposition leader Tony Abbott on the program. Don't miss that one.